Excellent. So the many years makes me sound really old. So I guess I am getting older. I have been in practice, I guess, for about 17 years. So it is, time goes fast. As you'll know, it seems very slow when you're in the midst of the thick of it. But as your kids get bigger, and I had very trying 2-year-olds myself and 3-year-olds. It doesn't, three's pretty tough too. But it's a lot of fun. It's great. So perfect. Um, So why the bad reputation? And I don't know if many of you have had 2-year-olds yet, or if you're in the thick of it, but two is pretty tough. So 2-year-olds are the age where they start to realize they are not part of you. You know, before that, they kind of think that everything they do evolves around you. You've done everything for them, and they're starting to realize, hey, I'm not connected to my mom, my dad, and I have my own things that I can do, and they start to kind of push the limits a little bit as they realize that. So milestones with a 2-year-old now, they're walking, running, jumping, getting into things, pushing, pulling, opening drawers, cabinets up and downstairs, and certainly at this point it's scribbling, markers on the wall, all that kind of stuff. So it's really is important that you are watching them well all the time, because again, they will push the limits, and of course have not figured out what is right, wrong necessarily. They're starting to figure it out, but they do try to push as much as they can. They play alongside others rather than with others a lot at 2. It's kind of more parallel play. And want kind of everything for themselves, because they're still not figuring out that cooperation a lot, which sometimes makes it a little bit tough. But starting to do more make-believe, imitation, watching what you do, that's a huge point where they're watching what you're doing and learning that. Affection is a great thing. They love affection. They love hugging, but also it could start or stop with a punch. So, so that's kind of part of that whole figuring it all out. Very possessive. Mine is a big thing. I do try to, sometimes it's cute when they're first saying mine, and a lot of times parents will say mine and kind of do a game. I try to discourage that, because after a while it isn't so fun. And when everything you go to the playground and they're saying mine, it gets kind of embarrassing. So it's something, that's one thing that I discourage people with trying to do that, because they're possessive enough without parents teasing and teaching that kind of thing. So it's a lot cuter just the first time than it is the 20th time. And persistent. 2-year-olds are very persistent. They know what they want, and they want it now, and they continue. Communication is very variable. I'm sure whether you have 2-year-olds or you've seen other 2-year-olds, some 2-year-olds start talking real early. Some 2-year-olds have a real difficult time of communicating what they want, and that can lead to a lot of frustration. So a lot of times it's repeating words. Some of them start speaking in sentences right at 2 or younger, and some of them it's really well into the 2-year-old time. So there's a lot of pointing and grunting and making some kind of the same sound to figure that out. So that can lead to a little frustration that leads to some of the trying 2s also. Learning body parts at this age, and then they do start to follow some simple instructions when they care to sometimes. So 2-year-olds should be at least half of the words that they say are intelligible of what they're understanding, but again, easily frustrated. So a lot of times the 18-month-old to 2-year-old that starts to bite, it seems like there's a little more biting in kids that are slower to talk, because there's frustration, and that's that oral thing, and there's some biting. So nonverbal communication can still be a huge part of a 2-year-old. Safety, just a little touch on that. We talked about it before, but it's just really important to stay safe, because they will get into everything, and you can't trust them for 1 second, right? When you turn your head and you think that you can trust them, they're getting into things. So just make sure that you're childproof. And also, I saw a 2-year-old today that the mother said was on top of the refrigerator. She pushed a chair by the refrigerator, put the stool on top of the chair, and climbed up actually on top of the refrigerator. So they get pretty smart, and that was just when she went upstairs to get the baby for a second. So just being smart with that. Smoke alarms, that's always important to have. Make sure your batteries are changed, and just touch on water heater. We do recommend setting a hot water heater at 120 degrees. 2-year-olds will go grab that hot water, and if you have it set 140, 160, it's amazing how quickly you can get a burn from that water. So it's a good thing in the safety part to do that. So again, constant supervision, we kind of talked about that. Feeding is a huge thing in trying 2s. It's a big frustration for parents. They give them the food, they throw half of it, they eat what they want, they throw the rest, and it can sometimes turn into a big power struggle. The biggest thing is trying not to make it a huge power struggle, because they'll win every time. You can't jam it down their gullet. So, offering 3 meals a day, a couple of snacks, trying to stay healthy with the snacks. I encourage people, especially in the age of we're watching how much kids are eating and what they're eating, not always grabbing a snack and saying it's snack time. That we don't have to constantly be feeding them all the time, but healthy snacks is great. So the food fight thing, feeding or giving them the meal. I like to try to give maybe the fruits and vegetables first, the things that they don't like as much when they're a little hungrier, and then offering the pastas and those things second, because a lot of times then when they're hungrier, they'll eat those things. But trying not to, again, you don't want to get into a big power struggle where you are saying this is what you'll eat and you will have nothing else. But don't try to make a whole nother meal and trying to get into doing the macaroni and cheese and the peanut butter sandwiches every meal. Easier said than done, but a lot of times if you do catch them when they're hungry, they'll eat those things if you're not catering too much. Desiring a few foods at a time is very classic, that they'll eat green beans like crazy for that week and the next week they won't touch them. So that's a real common thing, that they'll have certain legs or, things that they'll get into and not like variety. And they change their mind on what the variety is that they like. So trying not to give in all the time and making the foods interesting and colorful, helping them prepare the food is a great thing. I love that Family Fun magazine. They have so many cool ideas of different foods and different fun ways of making them and having the kids prepare. But just trying to make it fun and involve them. Whoops, wrong way. Sorry about that. Just to touch on choking hazards, that's a huge thing too. I like to always have kids sit at a table when they're eating and trying not to give them grapes or hot dogs and run around, because then they trip and fall, and that's right when they breathe in and kind of choke. But just watching that you're not doing a lot of round objects, and those are big ones at 2. There was one on here with peanuts is a big choking hazard. I remember when I was a resident, I asked the pediatric surgeon who pulled a peanut out of a child's lung one day, I said, when can they eat peanuts? And he said, when they can spell it, which probably is a bit of an exaggeration, but just really watching choking and watching that they're not running around. Mealtime leading by example is also huge. I really try, even at 6 months, try to tell my families to sit down as a family to eat is a great thing. There's a lot of studies showing that children are, it's just so healthy for them to sit down as a family and have a meal and shut the TV off. It's so often that especially before you have kids, you're used to sitting with your spouse and watching the news or TV, and it's really good to shut it off, have a conversation, ask questions. If they don't offer things, 2 is pretty tough, but just, again, talking about what was the best thing that happened today, what was the worst thing that happened today, and really try to get that dialogue, I think, is so important for families. So starting early is great, certainly at 2 years old, but I even say put them in the high chair at 6 months and do it together. So the next thing, which is often a struggle, is nap time. It gets difficult. Some kids are kind of outgrowing their naps at 2, believe it or not. Other lucky families have kids that are taking great naps at 2. We still try to encourage it, because otherwise they get pretty grumpy as the day goes on. But warning them is good. 2-year-olds, again, always saying, okay, we have this much time till nap time. You guys probably watched Barney because you're younger, but I used to gear time toward my daughter of saying 1 Barney show or 2 Barney shows, which I don't encourage TV. We'll get there. but just giving warning is a good thing, and trying to do some time. And then having the room dark and quiet. Routine is so important. Trying to get your nap time at the same time. If it's the 5th kid, that isn't going to necessarily happen, but as much as you can try to do some routine is a good thing. And then same thing with bedtime at night. Again, doing a routine, always having a toothbrushing, and then the story time, and then lay down, and trying to get out of the habit of laying with the child until they fall asleep, because that really does turning into a habit. So just trying to do that. If, as far as no excuses, trying not to have them, oh, I need a drink, and oh, I need to, it's always something more. Sometimes I will give them a ticket and say, you get one thing after you're in bed, you have one thing that you can come get a drink or put the cup of water by the bedstand or those kind of things, but trying not to get into that routine where it's over and over and negotiating and getting into that. The quicker you nip that in the bud, the easier, because it does turning into a habit. So here's the TV. Screen time is more and more studies showing how screen time is not a great thing for kids. Under age 2, we recommend no screen time, no computers, no laptops. There's a lot of learning things on there, granted, and you know, everybody is going to use some screen time for kids as far as getting a shower and those kind of things. But we do recommend not doing it under age 2. Over age 2, not more than an hour a day. And then touching on that, even with young kids under a year, 2 years of age, having the TV on the background where they're really have shown is actually interferes with language development. Because if you're just washing dishes and listening to the TV, a lot of times you're not engaging with the child on the floor who, you know, might just be playing. If you shut that TV off instead of listening to it, you might be more apt to say, oh, I'm washing the dishes now, I'm putting the dishes away, I'm going to sweep the floor, and just really helps with speech. So we recommend trying not to have too much background noise TV. And when you do TV, trying to do it together. Sorry, this is so touchy. Toilet training. So that usually, there's some 2-year-olds that get potty trained. It's usually a good 2.5 before they're starting to figure that out. The biggest thing is not pushing it, letting them help lead it. The worst thing is by calling them a baby, and you know, babies use diapers, you need to be a big girl, big boy, those kind of things, and trying to make it as positive as possible. Negative reinforcement really backfires at this age. It really causes difficulty. Signs of being ready is dry during naps. If they wake up dry from a nap, go to the potty right away. And even if they just sit on it and try, just really praise them. Oh, great, you tried to go potty, and just talking about it a lot and really praising it. The other sign of being ready is just following other simple directions. Go get your shoes or go get a book and those kind of things that they're starting to understand. And showing some interest. If they have no interest at all, it's pretty hard to force that. So, and then verbalizing needs. A lot of times they might tell you after they go poopy, I go poopy, or you're seeing them hide in the corner. You kind of know what they're doing in the corner, and try to just leapfrog from that and say, oh, great, you went poopy. Let's go dump it in the potty together, and kind of just trying to make it a real positive experience is the best. Sitting on the toilet frequently, again, watching for those cues like sitting in the corner, trying to go poop, after meals, after naps. Those are the best time. We all have a reflex after we eat that our bowels start moving, so that's a good time to go try to sit down and go. When you turn the bath water on, sometimes that sparks that feeling of needing to go to the bathroom, so trying to use those times. Or if you kind of notice it's the same time each day, trying to encourage them to sit, and really even trying sitting on that potty chair is a great thing. And trying some underpants or underwear, you know, there's going to be some accidents. Some kids really do better because they get that feeling and they know, whereas if they're in a pull-up, it kind of feels like a diaper. It's easier just to go, and that really depends on the kid. Some kids do well with getting into underpants, and sometimes it's a stressful thing. So discipline. So I think that's mostly what we think about with the trying twos, which can get a little bit trying. Always praising good behavior. And I really start that from the very beginning. At the age where you are tempted to say, no, don't do that, those kind of things, you also want to try to find at least 20 times a day that you praise them for something small. It might be tiny. It might be picking a book off the ground that they dropped, but really trying to catch them being good at least 20 times really helps them to want that reward. They want attention, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. They want your attention. And if it's sometimes they get more attention by doing something naughty because you're stopping them and no, don't do that. And so they'll keep doing that for attention. I also try to have you, as frustrated as you are when they're naughty, trying not to say, you're so naughty, or, you know, when you're talking to grandma or grandpa on the phone, they're being really bad today, because they do kind of live to what they're hearing. They're hearing you say, I'm bad, then they're a little bit more apt to be bad. So trying not to use those negative words even in front of them, I think, is helpful. And then limiting bad behavior, I guess, goes with that. And then modeling, same thing. If you're always saying, no, stop, No, they'll say that right back to you. No, stop. No. So I like to just trying to put a more positive twist on that. And every time you're tempted to say no, saying, no, thank you. Please don't do that. No, thank you. Because it is amazing how they just, their face lights up a little bit. And when they learn to say no, thank you, and when they don't want something or when you're doing something that they don't like. And it just makes that whole experience a little bit more positive. Common mistakes, reasoning or discussing with a toddler. You know, a lot of times you'll see somebody with a 2-year-old sit down and explain why they can't do that and go into a big lecture, which they don't hear any of that. So it really does just make them more frustrated by sitting down and hearing that. You can say, you know, a little bit of why you're not doing that, but try not to get into a big lecture because it just doesn't work at a 2-year-old. And not doing remote consequences. You know, the old, you just wait till your dad gets home. You know, I mean, that is really isn't helpful, and you just really want to change the thing right away that they did at the point, not waiting for dad to get home because they don't remember even what they did wrong by the time dad gets home. So trying not to do that, or taking things away in the future, especially at 2, that just isn't a very good thing. It's kind of the best is having the punishment fit the crime at that time. You know, if they are go and try to break something, you know, or reaching, you know, their hand in the DVD player, putting it up, you know, the DVD's gone, those kind of things. So just trying to really have the punishment fit the crime and doing it right away. Yelling for the sake of yelling. Again, I think as much as you can keep your voice calm is so helpful, because once your voice gets raised, their voice gets raised, they get more active and just being more defiant. So as much as you can keep calm in everything you say is very helpful. It's not always easy, but it is helpful. And being very consistent. If you just don't want to one time say it's okay, the next time it's not, and just trying, once you make that rule, as hard as you can, being consistent with it, and the lack of follow through. Kids really learn. It's Christmas Day, and if you're making threats, if you don't stop doing that, we're leaving grandma's house. If you don't stop doing that, you're leaving grandma's house. Well, you're not leaving grandma's on Christmas. So don't even make the threat, because they really learn you're not going to follow through. So, or, you know, a lot of times coming to the doctors, if you don't quit doing that, we're not going to get ice cream. But, you know, you already told them you're going to get ice cream. The siblings are getting ice cream. So don't make threats you're not willing to follow through. If you make the threat, you got to follow through with it, because they know. Encouraging good behavior. So this is a little bit of what we talked about as far as the modeling and the important for you know, as much as you can have calm voices and just doing the good behavior also. It's kind of a little bit of spanking. You know, we discourage spanking. American Academy of Pediatrics has shown that it isn't a helpful tool in behavior. And the next thing is you're spanking them for things that they're doing wrong, and then you're telling them not to hit. And at 2, they can't quite figure that out. So that's one reason that we don't like to do that. And then again, immediate praise for good behavior. Every little thing, as much as you can catch them being well, is a good thing. You don't necessarily need to reward it other than by words, you know. So that's a new thing that people are saying. Well, we give trophies for every kid for everything. You don't necessarily need to do big rewards, but as much as you can give them some positive praise, that's a great thing. Oh, here's the rewards. So very, very simple. So stickers, games, books, outings, as much as you can reward with time where you sit down and play a game with them, that's great. That's very helpful. So as much as one of the greatest things for a 2-year-old is time with you, is probably one of the greatest rewards. So as much as you can do that. And again, don't make promises that you can't keep. We don't recommend using food as a reward. You know, like potty training, M&Ms and that kind of thing, which seems like a very small thing, but they've really found that using that as a reward gives people positive, or gives them positive feelings. It can actually release some hormones that actually give them a positive feeling by getting that. And you don't want them to grow up having, every time I eat M&Ms, I get that positive experience feeling. So that's one reason that we don't like to use food as a reward. not just because of that particular moment, but just getting those positive feelings about food that can lead to other eating issues. Limiting bad behavior. So irritating, annoying others, pouting, whining, arguing, violence, temper tantrums. So easy to say to limit. The biggest thing is trying not to play into it a lot, where you're not, if they are having a temper tantrum and they're having, laying on the ground, banging their head, even with all our worry of concussions nowadays, it's very rare that they would cause harm by being on the ground and having a temper tantrum. The biggest thing you want to do is walk away. You don't want to reinforce it. You don't want to say, oh, stop, we don't do that. We want to be nice. You just want to ignore it, go into a different room. As long as you're not there to be entertained by it and talk to them about it, a lot of times that will limit it and make it go away. Same thing with, pouting, whining, or those kind of things. As much as you can ignore, those behaviors will usually go away. Well, there you go, ignoring the behaviors and the tantrums. And the child's main goal, again, is attention. It kind of does always go back to that. And trying not to react, either getting angry or laughing. That's another common mistake. It's so darn cute when that 2-year-old does something that's either having a temper tantrum, and it's sometimes easy to start laughing. And it is pretty cute the first couple of times, but same thing. They really get reward by that, and it can go on and on. So you just want to try not to react at all. So limiting the use of no, we talked about that a little bit. And it does lose meaning if you're always saying no. So tantrums, the many reasons for them to have tantrums, and that is the huge thing with the trying to's. Tiredness can make a huge thing. Before I was a parent, I always thought when parents said, oh, my child having this fit was just tired and needed a nap, I thought it was kind of an excuse, but it's not. It does make a huge difference. So as much as, again, being in a routine and watching those times, watching the tired boredom, if you're going somewhere where you're expecting them to be quiet, having a new book or something new for them to look at will help with those temper tantrums, going to the doctor. So just, they don't need a lot of different reasons. And again, try not to make excuses. Those are the reasons, but you don't want to coddle them because of having that. They might be having the temper tantrum because of those reasons, but you also want to limit it in the same way as far as ignoring and those types of things. So trying to anticipate and avoid, but not making an excuse. So we kind of touched on the tantrums already as far as ignoring them. And redirecting is a huge thing in a 2-year-old. If they're starting to have a tantrum, trying to take their mind off of it and showing them something else. Oh, here's this book, or did you see that car go by, or let's go look at a tractor, and trying to really redirect, talk about something else so they kind of forget that is a good thing. And then timeout, especially as they get older. There's a huge difference between a new 2-year-old and a almost to-be 3-year-old. And I think certainly as you get along there, it's important to certainly start doing some timeouts. Sorry, I thought there was a different slide in there, but the timeout for yourself too. It gets tough, especially if you're the main parent, or if you're home all day, or a single parent and you're the one that's handling all those temper tantrums. It is really hard. It's nice to be able to pass that off to another person, whether it be another parent, a grandparent, or a friend, and being able to take a time out for yourself and exercise and have someone else take care of it. And it's absolutely fine to, even if they're having the temper tantrum and you're losing patience, putting them in a safe place and you going in a different room and taking a break is absolutely a good thing to do. So consequences and punishments, again, you need to be concrete. You don't want some abstract thing about later something's going to happen. You're not going to go to Vala's pumpkin patch. A 2-year-old doesn't really understand what that even is or when that was going to happen. So you really want things to happen now, be immediate, be concrete. Taking away something, as much as you can have that fit the crime, is good. Taking away something that is associated with what it is. If they're fighting over a toy with a sibling and whacking them, take that toy away, put it up somewhere high where they can't get to it for a day or hour or whatever time. And again, avoiding, I think I've said that 100 times, but avoiding punishments that you can't follow through with, or you don't want to follow through. But that's an error that happens a lot, and they really can manipulate that. So timeouts, again, must be immediate, close to the time that it happens, and can be carried out anywhere. Although I went to Chuck E. Cheese, I think my son was probably 4 or 5 or something. It was his birthday party, and one of my kids' birthday parties, and was having a horrible fit. And I went and put him in timeout kind of by the bathrooms or in the hallway, and was seeing him at a distance through my eye. And the next thing I know, there's Chuck E. Cheese down talking to him. "What's wrong, little boy?" Which, of course, makes all of it go away. And it's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing that your kid is there having a fit in the hallway at the mall or Chuck E. Cheese or wherever, but it's so important and makes such a difference if they learn you're going to follow through and it's going to happen, and they can't do those things, and you're not going to give in just because it's embarrassing and you're at the mall or the grocery store or wherever. So you want to make sure and follow through with that. And then being consistent, doing it each time. They know that they can't bite. You don't give warnings. If you bite again, you're going to go to timeout. Well, you already said that yesterday. They know they can't bite. You need to put them in timeout and follow through with it and be consistent with it. So this is a picture of a little boy sitting on a stool. I usually really like the floor, especially for a 2-year-old, because a 2-year-old's going to wing themselves off the stool. And now they could injure themselves because they're coming from a height and they might be whacking into the table leg or whatever. So I think the floor is best. And just being in a neutral place, so that's fine. But I like if you have any place like a landing or a hallway where there's no toys, there's nobody else that they can look at, but just kind of a neutral place that there's nothing they can get into. That kid's going to turn around and start grabbing some toys out of that thing in a minute. But so if you can get things out of the way, that's the best. So this says warn once, and if behavior continues, time out. And again, that depends on what the behavior is. If it's a bite, you don't need to warn. If it's taking away a toy and something different, I think it's absolutely fine to give them one warning and then go from there. And then we've always said 1 minute for each year of age, and then again, knowing your child. So 2 minutes for a 2-year-old when they just turned 2 is a long time. 2 minutes when they're almost 3, that's not so much. So I think that you can do 2 minutes then. So you just kind of have to gear it a little bit on where they're at, how they're staying there. Also, timeout only starts when they're compliant. That means they can kick and scream and say bad words in the corner for 3 minutes, but their time doesn't start until they're quiet and they're sitting there quietly. So that's also a little bit difficult right at that 2-year time. There were times where I would get into a big power struggle, with my 2-year-old trying to say your time doesn't start till you're quiet, and how much they understand. So sometimes if it seemed like it was going on, we've done this for 10 or 15 minutes, then if I'm not looking at them and I'm in the other room and they don't know, they might even just be crying and take a breath and they're quiet, and I'm like, oh good, you're quiet, you can come out now. So but you want to always release them and try to release them when they're doing well. And then once they figure out that quiet time is when I can come out, they figure it out, and then they'll start being quiet and stay there, because then they learn I don't have to scream for 15 minutes before I get out of timeout. So again, tantrums don't count in timeout, and it is okay to sing and smile and talk to themselves. So there's a lot of people that say, my kid likes to go to timeout. He's happy there. That's okay. He's taken away from whatever he was doing before that had the negative action, and as long as he is in timeout, not having a fit, not saying, can I come out now? That was the thing that triggered me too, because you don't want them to say, can I come out now? Can I come out now? And you're letting them out. You always want to be the one to release them. So he might have figured it out and be so quiet. He's in timeout for, 5 minutes, and he's just 2.5. And you're like, oh gosh, I forgot I even had him over there. And he'll say, can I come out now? Say no, because you're in charge, he's not, and then you can wait 5 seconds and say, now you can come out, because you do want it to be, you don't want him always saying, can I come out? Because that will turn into a big slippery slope too. And then again, at 2, no big lectures or reasons why when they're getting out of timeout. So, The Nanny does quite a bit of lecturing, if you guys ever watched The Nanny, that TV show. And I think an older kid, that's fine. You can go in a little bit of what they did wrong. But certainly at 2, it isn't, that you just don't want to go into a big lecture. And if you want to have them say sorry or something, but you don't want to turn that into a big power struggle. So a lot of times people will say, you can come out of timeout, but you have to go tell your sister you're sorry. And then now they have another meltdown because they don't want to go tell their sibling they're sorry. You want to just be cautious. You don't turn that into a big affair. I think as they get older, you can do some of those apologies, but at 2 and that trying time, it's probably not the greatest to turn into another one until they kind of are figuring it out. And then again, positive reinforcement and praise. You want to praise them for staying in timeout. They did a good job, and now we're going to start over again and really reinforce what they're going to do well. And then giving your child control. So when I started the whole thing, I said 2 years or so trying because they're figuring out they're separate from you. They're their own self. It doesn't matter what you say, what you do. They're in charge of their bodies, their words, their mind, and you can't stop it. So you want them to feel some control because that's a lot of the frustration. So as far as positive and negative consequences, you don't want to go you don't want to make a big story about what kind of a reward or a consequence they have. But as time goes, you'll figure out what makes them click and what helps and what isn't as great. But choices is huge. They have to get dressed in the morning. You can put your shirt on first or your pants on first, or I said they have to get dressed. They don't necessarily. You can take them to school with their pajamas and take the teacher their clothes too, for that matter. Again, you don't want to get into a big thing. But if it's things that they can do, choose. A lot of times when I'm examining kids' ears, I say, do you want me to look at your left ear first or your right ear first? And it's amazing how many times they'll be more compliant because they picked what ear I'm going to look at first rather than just saying no and fighting. So as much as you can give them a choice, it's helpful. And again, the sense of power, they're figuring out that they're on their own. And again, picking between 2 options. So same, I said shirt or pants first or apple or orange, but trying to give them choices. And the biggest thing is enjoying each other. So sometimes at 2, there's days where you think, I love you, but I really don't like it. I mean, it's just so hard and it's so stressful. But then you'll have great days, and it really is a roller coaster a little bit, but trying as much as you can to be positive, sit down, have fun, be silly, and use those times. And they will get reward of having that fun and being silly and dancing and singing songs, and it really does help the behavior if you're not as much saying, just no and redirecting, but trying to catch them being good. So just reiterating all these things, encouraging and modeling good behavior. If it seems like they're sassing a lot, really take a step back, think about what words you're using. Are you using kind words, positive words? Are you getting into a rut where it's always no and negative? So really thinking about that a lot. And then rewarding as much as you can good behavior and giving them attention for good things and being consistent and following through. And they really do go fast. I can't believe I remember my son being 2 and he's in college now, and it just seems like a minute ago. So there you go. So, I'm really going back and forth. I'll move my hand. So any questions? Yes.
Are there any places that you should avoid for timeout? To avoid maybe
Sure.
like a negative association?
Great question. Can the people okay. The question was, are there any places you should avoid timeout and not do, which is an excellent question. I kind of touched on trying not to be on a stool or a chair so they don't wing themselves off and hit a coffee table, but also a crib is not a great place for timeout. I really discourage a crib. A crib is their safe haven. That's the place where they should like to sleep and enjoy it. That's their place. Sometimes people use it because they're trapped. Now they're trapped in timeout. They can't get out. But that really should be a spot where they, that it's a positive feeling. Because a lot of times it'll turn into a bedtime problem because why would I want to go to bed where I go to timeout? So really trying to stay out of that. And I really think they need to learn to sit still. When you're first doing timeout, you might put them back in that corner 10 times, and it's very frustrating. You think, it doesn't work for my kid. It will. You just have to be consistent. And again, trying to get them at that point where it might be a few seconds that they're sitting still and quiet, and if you praise that, oh, great job, you sat still, you were quiet, bring them out. The next time it's going to be a little longer, because they'll start learning, oh, that's what she wants me to do, that's what he wants me to do. So bedroom also, if they're a little older, I think a bedroom is an okay place, especially if it gets to the point where you're yelling a lot. So not as much the 2-year-old, but say a 4-year-old or 5-year-old, if you're frustrated and you are raising your voice and you're getting into a yell, I think it's fine for them to go to their bedroom. They already have positive feelings about their bedroom, so they're not going to think negative about it. And they need to be out of your face as much as you need to be out of theirs, if that makes sense. Yeah, so just, taking both of you, you're putting both of you in a timeout by using a bedroom. But so aside from a crib or somewhere where they can hurt themselves, or somewhere that you don't want timeout to be in front of a TV or with their toys, where it's okay if they would play with something, but it's probably best not to be by the toy box and they forget why they're there and start doing a choo-choo train or something. But yes.
How would you approach it if they're in the car?
How would you approach it in a car? So the biggest thing is probably ignoring. So they're in their car seat, they're in the back seat, and they're kicking their legs, screaming, and as much as you can ignore it. I wouldn't turn music up louder to try to drown them out, because that's going to raise them even louder and get everything going louder. So if you had classical music, that might help, something soothing and calming for both of you. But otherwise, just shutting it off and pretending that they aren't even back there and having a fit. Yes?
What's the best time to move them from the crib to the bed?
Well, especially when they start climbing out. So it's great if you can keep them there till 2 years or so, because they're safe, they're in there. But there are some 18-month-olds that can start winging themselves out, and so you need to get them out sooner. But I think if they're staying in the bed at 2, they're happy, I think that's absolutely fine. Right around that 2-year-old age is usually when they come out, or if there's a new baby coming and you need to use the crib again. So sometimes that happens earlier. It's tough, because if you have a 15-month-old, it's hard to get 2 cribs. If you had somebody you could borrow one for a minute, that might be nice. But yeah, so right about 2, or if they're starting to climb out sooner. And if they're there till they're 2.5 or 3, it's absolutely fine. It's not harmful to be in their crib, and they're safe, but you just don't want them climbing out. Yes?
Is putting them in a packing plate for the timeout okay?
Yeah, it's probably okay. However, I do think it's important for them to learn their own self-control rather than be imprisoned. That they're there and they're safe. Especially if you had to tend to another child, say, and you couldn't go tend to that child and then have that one in timeout, that might be a safe place. But I do really think you being consistent, calm, putting them in the timeout corner, and them learning to stay there is a good self-control thing rather than be trapped in a prison.
Even if you're angry and they're angry too?
If you're angry, they're angry, you just put them somewhere safe and walk away and take a timeout. I think that's fine. Yep, absolutely. Yes?
What's a good alternative to the mine syndrome? Or no, everything is hers. Mine.
I think saying we share everything, and you modeling that behavior a lot. And, if she wants something that you maybe have, say, oh, yes, I love to share. It's fun to share. And just really trying to catch that ahead of time. And really, if there's another child around that has something and they're offering it, oh, that's so great. You're sharing. I love sharing. And as much as you can say that. I even use that in my office when a 2-year-old wants my stethoscope. And I'm like, oh, great. I love sharing my stethoscope, because I just think as much as you can make that other twist, then they're usually like, oh, I like to share too. So, try not to get angry about it. Just try to redirect that. And trying for you guys not to say it. If it is even something that's yours she can't have, if it's your purse, try not to say, that's mine, Maybe that's a good place to say, no, thank you. Let's put that up high. Any other questions? Yes.
Kind of on that topic, we have 2.5-year-old twin boys, and so I was trying to give them some sense of ownership of some things. And so I don't know if I'm making it worse or not, because one of them has a certain color sippy cup and one of them has the other color. And if they'll say, well, this is mine, and I'll be like, yeah, that is yours. I mean, is that bad to do at this age then, or should I?
No, I don't think so in things like that, especially.
Share everything because they're
Right.
same gender, same age.
Right. Well, and you don't want them sharing cups because of germs and those kind of things. So, I think as long as you're using positive tones with that, and you're, if they're getting into a fight and struggling about it, just trying to be as positive and upbeat as possible, saying, it's great to share. I think taking turns is great too. If it is a toy, even though they both have their own toy, I don't think it has to be completely his and theirs, but as much as you can say, you can both play with it. He'll play with it for 5 minutes. Let's set the timer. And a timer is great for anything where they can actually visualize time. If it's something they can see clicking down. And he gets that for 2 minutes, and then you get it for 2 minutes. And they really do usually feed off that. But so I think to a certain extent, the safety thing and the cups and those kind of things and doing color, I think is a good thing, and they'll be fine.
I have a question on Twitter. I know you touched on sleeping. What suggestions do you have if the husband has trouble getting the son to go sleep in his bed and he only sleeps when mommy goes to sleep?
So there's a question on Twitter. The husband has trouble getting the son to stay in his bed and only goes to sleep when mommy goes to sleep. So the next question I would ask is mommy going to sleep in the son's bed, or are they in separate beds and the son goes to sleep? So it's really a good thing from the very beginning not to sleep together. And I know some families co-sleep, which is okay. It's not safe in infancy. We don't recommend it. There's increased risk of crib death and SIDS by co-sleeping. So, but families can make a decision as they get older. I think that it's a good habit to try to lay down with that child for, you take the bath, you read the book, you brush your teeth, and then you lay down with that book, but trying very hard not to lay there until that child falls asleep. That child, even in infancy, we recommend trying not to feed till they fall asleep. The last thing the kid needs to see is the walls, the ceiling, and learn to put themselves and transition themselves to sleep, because it really turns into a habit of wanting to parent to lay down with them. It's a hard thing to break, and the older they get, the harder it is to break. But so if that child, if the mom is going to sleep in her own bed and the child is going to sleep in their own bed, did they say something else? Okay.
The son is sleeping in the parent's bed.
Yeah. So, you just need to really put them in their bed, say, I'll lay down with you for this time, and you walk out. And if that kid comes out of the room, you put them back in the room. It's kind of like the timeout. They come out of the room, you put them back in the room. That could easily go on for an hour or 2 hours till they're ultimately tired, and they might fall asleep standing up, laying on the bed, or laying against the wall. And it might get, sometimes if that's where you want them to learn to do that before they're out of their crib and they're trapped in their crib. Once they're out of their crib, even shutting that door, and if they learn to open the doorknob, we sometimes have even put a little eye hook lock there, which is very painful as a parent, because you don't want to lock your child in a room and then unlock it later after, when you're going to bed, because certainly it's a fire hazard or those kind of things. But they do have to learn to stay in there and following through with it. But it's hard. I've done it as a parent. Believe me, I've been through all those things. But it's really hard, but you just got to follow through. It will be a miserable night. I mean, it could easily go on for a couple hours, but you have to follow through and try not to give in when you're tired.
Put a safety thing on the inside of the door. And then
With those
shut
things
the door,
that
but
they
then
can.
she'll just cry until she falls asleep in front of the door and we can't move her back. So, but I was curious if that's good to hear you say that, because I was wondering if that's that's good or bad or what.
No, it's fine. So they were saying that they put one of those doorknobs that you can't turn, and the child fell asleep in front of the door. And it's absolutely fine, because they'll figure out that it's not comfortable after a few nights. And so, and then they'll start going closer to their bed. You can sort of transition a little bit by, laying down on the floor in their bedroom, trying not to fall asleep with them there, but working closer to the door. But it's kind of a longer process. But that is another way of doing it. And sometimes we even have kids see a psychologist if they're trying all these things and you're not getting anywhere, because it's very hard to go to work the next day when you're doing this all night long with your kiddos. But sometimes the psychologist can get a little, work a little bit more in depth of what's reinforcing that kid. There's usually some reinforcement. There's something you're doing that keeps that child keep wanting to come out, that you're ultimately giving in or something. But does that make sense? Yes.
Is it okay for, like last night, my daughter started preschool yesterday. So yesterday we went and we got home at 8:30. I gave her a bath. I put her to bed by 9. And she didn't want to go to sleep. So this morning waking her up was kind of a struggle because she didn't want to get up because she was so tired. So at preschool, I asked them to take the passy away, and there's no passy. So we can start learning not just strictly take it away, but slowly take it away from her so she doesn't ask for it. And so today she's very cranky because she didn't want to go to bed last night and she didn't get to sleep till 10:30. So when I woke her up this morning, it was a struggle. So my boyfriend said it was mean for me to make her come tonight. So she because she was so tired and I didn't put her to bed instead of bringing her tonight. So what do you suggest that I do? I don't even know if it's a question or if I should is that mean of me as a parent for me to make her stay up all day, or?
So the question was, the child went to preschool yesterday and then got home late and then didn't want to go to sleep and was up till 10:30 at night and then had trouble getting up this morning because she was so overly tired and exhausted, but then had to get up and then coming here tonight and do the whole day again. It's not, that's part of the routine thing. And I think she'll figure out, and then she'll get more tired and then fall asleep at night. Everything isn't ideal, but no, it's not mean. And the worst thing you can do is let her sleep in, because then it's going to change her whole thing, and then she's going to want to stay up till 10:30 at night all the time. It's kind of the teenager syndrome, right, where they stay up till 2 in the morning and sleep till noon. But I think that once she gets into that routine and trying, when you don't have these things and coming here, if you try just to get out of that, get into a routine where you are getting her to bed at a decent time, and then she'll be tired from the day and being up and she'll fall asleep. But being consistent, and you're not mean. It's hard. Yes.
We're consistent with routine and bedtime, and my husband has night classes probably 3 nights a week, and my daughter throws a fit if he's not home to put her to bed. And normally I wouldn't care to let her cry it out, but now she's sharing a room with her 7-year-old sister. Any suggestions on how I can get her to calm down without keeping our 7-year-old up for couple hours?
So this is Dad is taking night classes, and he's gone 3 nights a week, and he is the one that used to put the child to bed, or she doesn't want to go to sleep till Dad gets home, and now she's sharing a room with the 7-year-old, and if she's crying it out, she's waking up the 7-year-old. It's tough, I think that I usually, depending on how much she's crying, usually is the other kids in the same room. And I say the same thing with infants. If you let them cry and you tell the older siblings they're fine, that's how a child learns to go to sleep. As long as they know you know it and they're safe, they'll usually sleep through it. 7 might be a little bit harder than a 3 or 4-year-old, but is a little bit more difficult. But I think you still need to follow through. If it was going to be for 2 months, then I would say, that you could throw her schedule off a little bit, but it's not. I think that she needs to learn to follow through there, and you just reassuring her. And it's tough. It's tough when the parents are there gone at night. I don't know if that answers the question very well, but I think you still need to be consistent and follow through for everybody's sanity, and letting her cry is okay. Yes.
Our daughter is on the verge of potty training, and at daycare today, apparently she expressed interest a couple times in wanting to use the big potty, but it was as if she showed interest, she pulled her own pants down, and then when they went to actually put her on it, it was like she kind of turned into a chicken and was like, no, just kidding. So is that, in that situation, should you push through it and put her on
No,
there to let her
no.
know it's not scary, or is she just not?
Nope, I would back off. So this was a child on the verge of potty training and wants to go and asks to go, and then when they go to put her on the potty, she says, no, I don't. I wouldn't push that. You know, I think the next time she might do it, and I don't know if they have a little potty chair that sometimes, okay, perfect, okay. You know, and that's if it's a little bit harder. I don't know how they do it at school as far as everybody using it, but I think sitting on it with your clothes on and being friends with the potty chair, reading a book sitting on the potty chair so they're not afraid of it when their clothes are on, and having it not be scary. One thing, these self-flushing potties are terrible for potty training because you know how you get on there and it flushes, and that scares the heck out of kids, especially if it's splashing on their bottom. So our office, I wish we didn't have self-flushing ones because it does scare toddlers. So trying to make it positive. I wouldn't push because I think it's going to backfire. So just making it positive. I think that's good. Did you have another question? Before? No, okay. I thought you raised your hand before and I didn't. Okay.
I just don't even know if I want to say it out loud because it's so like when did they just determine that all of a sudden that the spanking isn't good anymore? Because I really understand the whole, well, you can't tell them not to hit and then hit them, you know, or spank them, because then how are they supposed to understand? But they really don't understand any of it. You know what I mean? They're not like logical creatures. It's kind of like, I think as long as it's tempered and balanced with, a spanking to me like is just as important as a well-timed spanking is just as important as a hug. You know what I mean? There's just certain scenarios where it's appropriate, and I can tell you that I have a 14-year-old son now, and that was, you know, back then raising him. I mean, that's what we did. That's how my parents raised me. I mean, they're from the South.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
It's just how I came up, and so now we have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and we've done less of that. And I can tell you that the behavior is much more erratic and much less controllable. And I mean, it's the results that I've seen personally, just doing it personally. And again, it's not just like the cold iron fist of dictatorship, you know, and that it's you know, we do the hugs and the support, and when praise them when they're doing well, and all that too. So I think just combined, I don't know. I just really would be interested to see the studies and the criteria they used, and you know, the control, and like what the long-term outcome was, and what they measured as criteria for success, or you know, came to the determination that spanking is no longer something
Sure.
that we should do.
So this was a question, where did we come up that spanking is not a useful thing? And a dad who had experience that spanking was useful with one of his children, and now that they're not spanking as much, he feels that the behavior maybe isn't quite as good as it was before. It actually was a study. I can't quote where it was, but it has been some studies that have been done and published in pediatric literature. And I think if you probably Googled spanking studies, it should pop up a little bit, that actually showed that it's not as useful in changing behavior as timeouts are in changing behavior. And there are people that choose it. And, you know, I think a swat on a bottom, you know, it's still considered okay. It's still American Academy of Pediatrics. I don't recommend that for behavior things. Did I ever swat my kid? Yeah, I did, and probably sometimes was out of more of the anger than out of trying to, you know, that it's frustration and they're still not listening, and give them a swat. Certainly, we recommend never using any utensils. I was spanked with a pancake turner when I was a kid. I still, when my mom opens that drawer and everything goes, it's like running, it's like getting away. But it, you know, there are studies that have shown it doesn't work as well as timeout. But I can't quote where those are at, but that's kind of where it came from. So
I looked around for them, and I can't find anything like really conclusive, you know, that says, you know, here's what it is, and here's the study, and here's how we measured it over time, and here's how we could tell that the control kid grew up differently, and you know, it's just very hard to find some conclusive research, right? And I get it, you know, like no belts and switches and objects and whatever, and not on the mouth and not on the hands, and just on the butt, you know, or whatever. But me personally, I've seen results from this, so I know that you guys aren't supposed to teach anymore, but it'd be nice, just feedback.
I guess that, you know, and I'm not sure exactly
Yeah.
again where the study is, but I, you know, it's one of those things of reading in our literature, but I can't quote it. Did you have a question?
Our daughter recently started grinding her teeth, and it sounds horrible. I was wondering if there was a reason why she was doing it, or any ways to deter from doing it?
It usually is when the probably 2-year-old molars are coming in, and it usually is self-limited once those go through. It's real common with sleeping too, but they'll grind it with that feeling, and it is usually self-limited. A lot of times it happens kind of at 1 year with those coming in, and at 2 years, and sometimes even at 5 years, but it is usually less. So if it seems, if it's worrying you, maybe having a dentist look and make sure that they're not grinding anything down, but it's usually self-limited and treating, with a Tylenol or Motrin if there's a certain time as far as teething pain, or giving her, a washcloth, although that sounds probably pretty bad too, chewing on that, but something to chew on a little bit. But
I also had a question about pacifiers. Is there any good way to try and get her to stop using them?
well, kind of what she was recommending back there too, doing it out of sight, out of mind at first as much as possible, so you're not having them sit around and they're like, oh, there's my pacifier, and then they're grabbing it. On the computer where the question was how to get rid of a pacifier. So as much as you can keep it so that they aren't seeing it, and trying to at least wean to maybe just bedtime and nap time. Yeah, and if you get rid of the pacifier, even by 4, which it's pretty rare that they have it, but the teeth will readjust. So if you're not having it out in public, it's just helping with sleep, I don't think it's as huge a deal. So nothing to feel guilty about.
All right. Thank you all.